Rupak Kumar from IT department. We just start today introduction to C++ programming language. So first we see what is the history of C++. As you can say, C++ is basically a multi-paradigm programming language and that support object-oriented programming. This is what we start with the new era of the programming after C. That is what the important of this C++ is, that we start with a object-oriented programming concept in this C++. So, and this is what that is created by Bajorn Stolzkopf in 1983 and at the Bell Labs. They start this C++ programming, Bajorn Stolzkopf, and he starts C++ is an extension of that is what the C programming language. And we can say as C is nearer to machine, but C++ is basically created this programming language to make it nearer to us. Us means the programmer. So we can say this is what the extension of C programming, and the program written in C language and can run in a C++ compiler. So there is a compiler which runs the C++ program, that is C++ compiler. Next point we can say regarding history, the development of C++ actually began 4 years before its release. Means it started in 1979 and it did not start with the name C++. So its first name was C with class. So it is not a C++ in starting. It is basically a C with a class, and afterward it is just, as it is an extension of C programming, that's why it's a C++. So in start it was only C with class. And in the late part of 1983, C with class was first used for AT&T's internal programming needs. So its name was changed to C++ later in the same year. Means before C with class, and it changed to C++ around 1983. So it is the course also used in a wide range of other application domain. Means it is not only used in a some particular domain. It's a very wide range of domain where we can use this C++ programming language. Or we can say C++ supports, basically it supports inheritance through classes derivations, or we can say dynamic binding is provided by a virtual class function in the C++. This is what the beauty of this C++ programming language. It is a very drastic change around 1983 in the era of programming. Now first we know what was the C and what is the extension of that is for C++. So what is basic difference, how we can differentiate these programming language? One important difference is only it is a object oriented. It is the first object oriented programming language. So we can say C is basically a procedural programming language, but for the C++, it is a non-procedural, it is a object oriented programming language. The basic and main fundamental difference is that it is not only a programming language, but it's a object oriented concept. That is what first introduced in this programming language, which is widely used throughout the world. So the basic difference is C is basically procedural programming language and C++ is non-procedural, that is object oriented programming language. Next we can say in C we basically use a top down approaches in a program to design something, but in C++ bottom up approaches adopt in a programming design. This is what the two difference. It uses top to bottom and it uses bottom to top. Next, multiple declarations of a global variables are allowed. Multiple declaration means we can have a declaration of something multiple times in a program, but in C++ multiple declarations of a global variable are not allowed. We cannot multiple time declare the variables globally. So this is what some difference we can see in a C and C++. So, and next important is C requires all the variables to be defined at the starting of scope. Means C always declare everything when we start the program, but in a C++ it allows to declare the variables anywhere in the scope. Means that is at the first time of its first use and inside the program. This is what we can say it is also a major difference, that in C we are just declaring variables at start only when we start the program. So there is no any scope in between the program. But C++ we can have a scope to declare the variables anywhere where it is needed. So this is what another beautiful thing that we improve in our C++. That's why it's not a C, it's a C++. And last we can say in C, malloc and calloc. This is what the important function are used for memory allocation and free to free the memory. As memory concept is very important in the programming. We have to concern with memory, we have to save our memory, we have to free our memory. So in C, if we want to do all these things, malloc, calloc and free function is used for allocating the memory to our line of codes. And in C, if we talk about in a C++, what we can say in a C++, a concept, a new keyword, that is what new and delete. New and delete operators are used for memory allocating and deallocating. So only we have a two keywords here, new and delete, for allocation of memory. But in a C we have a malloc, calloc and free function to allocate the memory inside our programming language. Clear? So this is what the basic difference in C++. But we can say there is a drastic change. There is a era of that of programming language where we can introduce a very beautiful concept of a program. That is what we can say a OOPS, or we can say a C++. Now, use of C++ language. We can say C++ is used by programmers to develop a computer software. And basically any types of software we can develop in a C++ environment. And it is also developed in C, but it is not easy to develop. But it is very easy to develop in a C++ environment. Next, we can say it is used to create a general system software. To run the system, we also need a software, and this general system software is very easily generated by this C++ language. It is also used to build a drivers for various computer device. Means drivers for every related hardware. We need some driver software also. If we have a printer, then we can say we must have a driver of printers. If we have any scanner, we must have a driver of that. So every software needs driver. So it is the C++ language where we can very easily create the driver software with the help of this C++ programming language. Next, we can say software for servers and software for a specific application. So this is also it is the software, it is the programming language by which we can create a server side software also, and we can say many applications also. We can do it very easily in a C++. And very important, nowadays we are using multiple types of video games also, and that is also created in C++ very easily. Now, this is what the beauty of this new programming language around the era of 1980s. Now, we can see what is the advantage while we are going to use a C++ programming language. What is the advantage of this over some old programming language? There was many programming languages like A, B, C, C++ and many more. But this is what the famous and easiest way to program. So programmers like this programming language very much. So if we talk about the advantage, we can say what is the advantage of this C++ programming language? We can say C++ is basically relatively low level and is a system programming language. So C++ is basically low level and system programming language. So this is what advantage over programming language. It is not a high level, it is a low level programming language, and we can say it is not a low level also, it is a middle level programming language. It is between high level and low level. So we can say C++ is basically middle level programming language. Next, it has a large community. If we talk about the community of this programming language, we can say it is very widely used. So it is a very large community over which we can discuss, we can generate the things, we can discuss over this language. So this is what we can say, it has a very large community. Next, it has relatively clear and mature standard. So we can say it is very clear and mature standard is created while creating a compiler of C++. Next, modularity is also an advantage of this programming language. Next, we can say very important programming concept is that reusability of the code. Now this is also important. Once we create a code for a one program, and that code may be or can be used for different software. If we are going to create a very big software, we do not need to write all the code. Now we can just reuse the code which were written previously. So this is also a beauty of this programming language, that reusability and readability of this code. So this is what very important things. It's very easy to reuse the code. It is very easy to readability of the code. This is what some of the advantage. There is a major advantage. If we talk about the advantage of this C++, we have a variety or wide range of advantage over there. But we can say this is also one of the important advantage of C++. Now there is some disadvantage also, like advantage. So we can have a disadvantage also of everything. So if we talk about some of the disadvantage of this C++ programming language, we can say data is global or local. So this is what some disadvantage. The data is may be a global or it can be a local. Next, we can say it emphasizes on a instruction but not on a data. It is only give a attention of what the instruction is given to the program. So there it is not much more concerned with a data. What is data? It is not concerned about that. It's just see the instructions given to that compiler. It can be generally a heavy if not careful. So we can say if we are not careful, if we are not sorting the code, we can say it can create a program very heavy. Even if we can write the C addition program is also very heavily used if we not aware, or if we are not concerned with the saving of memory and all. So we have to take care of this memory also while we are creating the program. Otherwise it's a very heavy, if not careful regarding that. Next disadvantage of this C++, we can say data is global. Means a global data that does not have a security, and it can declare the global data, and we can say if data is global, it may or may not be secured, or security is somewhere not very concerned. This is what the disadvantage of C++ programming language. Now, if we talk about libraries, we can say library means something that we can have to generate something, we can have gain something from that. So if we talk about the libraries of this concerned C++ programming language, we can say it has a very wide range of library, and this makes a programming language very beauty of this programming language is basically standard libraries, like other programming language. So you can say the first is that the C++ standard library can be categorized into two parts. If we make a categories of this library of C++, we can have two parts. First is that the standard function library, means this library consists of a general purpose. This library consists of a standalone function, and that are not a part of any class, and that is not considered, that is not given in any class of that programming language. So the function library is inherited from C. So this is what something that is what inherited from C in this C++ is that the function library of the programming language. Second part of this standard library is that the object-oriented class library. Very important library of the C++. That is what the object-oriented class library. We can say this is basically a collections of classes and associated some functions also. So the object-oriented class library basically this is a collection of class and associated some function with that class, and that is what widely used inside our program while we doing the code, while we writing some lines of code. Clear? Next is your standard C++ library. So incorporates all the standards of C library also with some small additions and change to the support type, or we can say safety of these library files. This is what also considered with a C++ library, and that is what with a C also. Now a basic structure, how we write a program in a C++, we can have a basic structure over here. We can see here we can have a header file declaration first. So first of all, while writing the program, we have to declare a header file, and that is what declared in the start of the program. So we start with a header file which is used inside our code, which is used inside our program. Next, we have to declare some variables and all. So these all variables which is used inside the program can be declared over here, and this is called a global declarations section. So first you have a header file, then we declare some variables over here, that is what global declaration. Next we have a class declaration and method defined in the section. So we have some classes, we have some methods, means we can say everything is object inside the world. No, we can say this board is object, this pen is object, this remote is object, everything is object. So that is what we can say every object has some function. Means what is the function of this pen? We can say the function of this pen is to write something. What is the property? That is what the method, that is what define the property of pen is that it's a metallic and all. So this is what declare inside this class declaration and method sections only. Next we have a main function. Every program must start with a sub function. If there is any one and only one function, that must be the main function only. ना किसी भी प्रोग्राम में अगर केवल और केवल एक फंक्शन है, that must be main. और कह सकते हैं अगर if we have a multiple function and there also one of that function is main only, उसमें से एक तो main होगा ही होगा. This is what very clear declaration in any programming language. So कोई भी प्रोग्राम है that must have some function. If there is only one function, then we can say it is only main function. Clear? So we must have a main function inside the structure of C++. Clear up to this? Next we have to define the method. Method definition section is at last of the program. So we define something. What is that? We have to define inside our program what the program is. So this is what all about your structure of C++. Clear? So this is what the basic structure we can say while we are just going to create a program in a C++. This is what the basic structure of C++ programming, in which we have a header file declaration section, we have a global declaration section, then we have to declare the class declaration as well as the methods of the class. Then we have a main function, which is very important function, and next we have a method definition section. This is what your C++ basic structure. Next, we start with a simple program. We start with the first program in the C++. So as we see in structures, we have to declare the header file. That is what header file declare here. We start with some hash. That is what it is, a preprocessor directives. That is what has includes. We use the keywords include, and that inside this smaller than greater than sign we have a header file like iostream. iostream with the extension of .h. iostream.h means it is a header file. So we declare the header file like this in our program in a C. This is called a comment line, is that it is a header file. Then we have a main. This is what the important thing. Main is always in a program. Without any function we cannot have any program in a C++. So it is start with the main function, and it is integer type defined. It may be void also, but it is int main. So this is what the main function. Declaration of the program. Inside the program we declare the code inside this curly braces. We have all the codes inside that. So we can say what we have to print. We have to print the hello something here. So we have a function in a C++, that is cout. This is how we write the cout and hello, and output of this program is basically print the hello. Clear? This is what the output of this program. This is what the simple program in a C++. It is also based on this structure only. Now, the important things, that is what we have to know in a programming language. In a C++, we have a data types in a C++. C++ data types. So first we have a primary data types, then we have a user defined data types and some derived data types. So if we talk about primary data types, we can say the primary data types basically int, float, char and void. These are the primary data types used inside our program in a C++. This is what basic data: integer, float and character and void. Next, user defined data type. This is what defined by some users inside our program, and in this user defined we have a structures, union, classes and enumerations. These are the user defined data types in the C++ programming language. Next, derived data types. Some data types is derived inside the program, and these derived data types is basically known as array, functions, pointers and references. These are the derived data types. So these are the very important in a C++ programming. Any data types in a C++. So we can say data types in a C++ is basically three types: basic primary data type, user defined data type and derived data type. So this is very important to understand the things. So these are the three important data types in a C++ programming language, and it is very widely used inside our program. We are using in a daily basis the program also. Next is the C++ variables. What is the scope of the variables? So if we talk about the scope of variables, we can say a scope is a region of the program, and we can say broadly speaking there are three places where variables can be declared. First is your inside a function or a block, which is called a local variables. Locally inside some block we use some variables, that is called a local variables. Next, in the definitions of function parameter, which is called a formal parameters, where we can define inside that function parameter, and that is called a formal parameter. Next is your outside of all function, which is called a global variables. This is all about your C++ variables inside that program. So what is the scope? It is out of local, local. Next is your formals, and other is your global variables. So this is all about your basic of a C++. We start with a second series of basic fundamental things also. Okay, till then, thank you.